Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Village of Gurnee Planning and Zoning Board for this Wednesday, February 3rd, 2021. Could we have roll call, please?
Bow,
I'm here.
Garrity, Nordentoff,
I heard you.
Path,
Here.
Pasak,
Here.
Riley, and Sula.
Present. We do have a quorum. If everyone would please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from our meeting that was held on the 6th of January. Does anybody have any questions or comments? If not, a motion to approve would be in order.
Motion.
Moved by Mr. Pasak,
Second.
second by Mr. Paff. All in favor? I can do the all in favor now, right? Or do we still have to call out?
Correct.
Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is a public hearing. It's a petition from the Village of Gurnee for text amendments to address outdoor self-storage. Sarah?
The Village of Gurnee is seeking zoning text amendments related to outdoor storage, including but not limited to the following sections. Article 2.1, definition of general terms. Article 7.1.2, use permissions in the EGG East Grand Gateway Overlay District. And Article 8, uses. Recently, staff had an inquiry from a property owner about using his property for outdoor self-storage, where owners could store and access their boats and recreational vehicles. When looking at our zoning ordinance, the definition for self-storage specifically prohibits any outdoor storage. We looked at the definitions of other uses, such as storage yard, outdoor, vehicle operations facility, warehouse, and contractor storage yard, to see if the use could fit into any of those categories. Unfortunately, the definitions for each one of those uses were not a fit. While looking into this, staff also noticed that the definitions of accessory use and accessory structure had changed between the previous zoning ordinance and the 2015 update, and quite a bit of clarifying language was removed erroneously. Staff determined the best approach was to process text amendments. So if you want to follow along on the notes, I can go through what those text amendments are. So for...
Excuse me just a second. Brian, do we need to swear anybody in?
This is a staff presentation, so we're fine. You can open it for public comment after we get the presentation.
I'm just asking because it's public hearing. Okay, thanks. All right, go ahead, Claire.
Okay. So for Article 2.1, we are removing the definition for accessory structure, since there is a separate definition for accessory structure and accessory use. And we are adding in language from our previous zoning ordinance, and we are doing that for the accessory structure or use. And should I read all of that into the record, or do we need?
You do
Okay.
not have to.
Okay, so you can take a look at those. Specifically, the one that we noticed was not in the previous definition was, is subordinate and serves a principal structure or principal use. So that was the one we were concerned about, was that the accessory use would have to be connected to the principal one. So these changes simply add back in language that was removed with the update and provides a clearer definition for accessory use and structures. So the next one is in the same section. It's for self-storage facility, the definition of that. We're removing the line that says self-storage facilities do not include any outdoor storage, and we'll address why that is the case with some of the remaining ones. But basically, we are proposing to delete that, and by removing the prohibition of outdoor storage from the definition, a facility can apply for a special use permit for any accessory outdoor storage if they're in the C3 or I1 districts. The only slight inconsistency is in the I1 district, where outdoor storage accessory to an industrial use is allowed by right. And then in this case, a self-storage facility would need to go through a special use permit for accessory outdoor storage. To remedy this inconsistency, self-storage would need to be changed to a permitted use in that district, and staff is looking for the Planning and Zoning Board to weigh in on this as to whether you want a special use permit required for the outdoor storage, or whether you would want it permitted in the I-1 district. So section 7.1.2 is related to the East Grand Gateway District. This one specifically allows self-storage, even though in the C2 district, self-storage would not be allowed. This was something that was done specifically for the East Grand area, and something that we wanted to add to this was that self-storage facilities are allowed, but they must be fully enclosed, and no outdoor self-storage would be allowed in the East Grand district. And then the next one is the use matrix. So this is what we are proposing for permitted and special uses. And that's for both self-storage facility, and that one's staying the same, but then we're adding the principal use is outdoor storage section. And then in 8.2.6, these are principal use standards that have to be met. We already have a use standard for contractor storage yard outdoor, industrial light, general heavy with outdoor storage, so we felt that it was appropriate to add in self-storage facility with accessory or principal outdoor storage, and we did that so that we get some of the screening requirements and things like that that would be similar to the self-storage use with the outdoor storage. And then, just to make things more clear to anyone reading the zoning ordinance, we also added a section E to this that states any accessory outdoor self-storage requires a special use permit. And then finally, we are striking the phrase about fencing and screening that says including ingress and egress. That's an A of the principal use standards. And the reason for this is that while we were looking at the plan for outdoor boat and RV storage, it became clear that fencing the drive, entry, exit that services the storage lot didn't make a lot of sense in that case and in other cases as well. I know that was a lot. Does anyone have questions?
Okay, questions or comments? Ryan?
Guess I'm just perplexed as to why we're even entertaining the idea of allowing outdoor storage, period. I mean, everybody can drive around and see these areas that allow outdoor storage, and it just looks horrible. I mean, I'm not for any of this, and particularly in the I districts where it's permitted use. We don't even have the right to have the petitioner come here before us and show what they're going to do. I can't support any of this.
So I don't know if you can hear me. So all we were trying to do is address the self-storage, and we were taking a look at what other outdoor storage we had in the zoning districts, and since we have outdoor storage as accessory in the industrial districts, that's why we made it accessory. Well, we didn't actually make it, it's our, let me back up. So the zoning ordinance right now prohibits it. I think that there's a lot of self-storage facilities that do have some ancillary, and then there's also the self-storage facilities that are completely principal outdoor self-storage facilities, and that's what we were trying to address based upon us having a petition before us for this type of use. And then when we were looking at this, we were just trying to keep it consistent with some of the other uses that we have and how we treat accessory and principal outdoor storage. It's certainly not something that you have to change. It's just that there are these uses that are out there. We might get some inquiries about them. We already have. We do allow other types of outdoor storage in a similar situation, as long as it's fenced and screened, and so we're just trying to keep that consistent.
Tracy, let me ask a question just to clarify things. When we're referring to self-storage, are we referring to a business where someone is offering the use of their property for someone else to store goods? Or does it also include a factory that can store their raw materials outside in there?
That's already allowed with the outdoor storage yard for an industrial.
Okay, but when we say self-storage, is that a defined term?
It's defined in it's right in front.
I think it's on the first page, yeah, self-storage
Page one.
facility on page 1 of the notes, the very bottom.
Page 1, bottom.
Facility for the storage of personal
okay.
property where individual renters control and access individual storage spaces, accessory retail sales of related items such
Okay.
as movie supplies.
Okay, that's the
office-
definition of self-storage facility. I'm asking, is there a definition of self-storage?
Well,
Because
if you-
self-storage facility clearly is referring to a business operation that is renting out their space for other individuals to store product. Whereas there's also outdoor self-storage where, like a factory,
If you think that we need to add another definition for self-storage, that's not a self-storage facility. If facility to you means that it's a building, we can certainly do that. We can say self-storage, and then just say, site for the storage of personal property where individual renters control and access their storage area.
I guess what I'm trying to get to, is there a difference in screening requirements for outdoor self-storage depending upon whether it's a facility that's in the business of providing storage, or it's a facility that has storage ancillary to the operation of their business?
No, they both require screening,
And it's the same?
correct.
Okay, okay. I just wanted to clarify
How
that.
many self-storage facilities do we have in the village right now? I can think of a couple.
I can think of at least 3.
3?
There may be more than that. I'm thinking of the
U-Haul
U-Haul,
really,
the,
okay. U-Haul isn't open for self-storage yet, but, so U-Haul potentially in the future.
the,
And then,
what's the big one on 41
right,
there?
And there's one on Delaney, too.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, that's right, yeah.
Delaney,
I cannot
is
think
there
of the one on 41, but.
By Northwestern there, where the railroad track is?
yes,
Yep,
So there's 4, right?
right.
yep.
Okay.
Did they have outdoor storage now?
None of those do at this time that I'm aware of. But the one up at Delaney was existing, prior to, I think, annexing into the village. So I'm not sure if they have any. I don't believe so, but it was a pre-existing condition, so it
Okay.
was here prior to 90s.
The guy that was storing vehicles outdoors on Washington and Cemetery?
That was outside of the village.
That's not in the village, right?
That's not in the
No, that was
village.
not in the
Okay.
village.
One of the other reasons that we're proposing this is, I don't know if you remember, but, years ago, we wrote some pretty stringent requirements for what people could do in terms of storing their RVs and their boats on their private property.
Yeah.
And we had to, we wanted to give them options of where they could store their boats and RVs, and this is an option. Otherwise, if we don't change this, then they have to store them either indoors or at another facility outside of the community.
Right.
Okay, Josh?
My question was about an example of an I-1 where you wanted us to weigh in, as to whether we're uncertain whether the board prefers to preserve the I-1 district more for light industrial uses and not have self-storage facilities. I just wanted to open that up for a quick discussion. What exactly, you're asking, should all those outdoor storage questions come to the board? Or should we just allow all I-1 to have it permissible?
Well, so right now, in the I-1 zoning district, a self-storage facility is a special use permit. So as a special use permit, they would have to come into us whether it would be all indoors, or whether they had any accessory, or whether it was principally outdoor self-storage. All we were saying is that in the I-1 zoning district, you can have an outdoor storage yard by right. You can have, by right, you can have accessory storage, or accessory to an industrial use by right. So there's an inconsistency there between the outdoor storage of an industrial user and the outdoor storage of a self-storage facility. We just wanted to see what the Planning and Zoning Board felt about that inconsistency. The I-1 zoning district, if you want to keep it more for industrial, then I would say keep it as a special use permit and not change it to be more consistent with how light industrial can do accessory outdoor storage, which is by right.
Do we have any what's an example that has, that light industrial that has outdoor storage today, that came to us? Do we know of an example?
There was one in the last couple of years.
Light industrial?
Who was that?
There are a number up in the northeast area of town.
Uh-huh.
I can't,
Off the top of your
I
head?
mean, again, it's permitted by right, so it wouldn't have come before us, because in industrial, it's allowed, they just have to fence it. But I think there's some up in the Swanson, core area, there's some, I believe, off of Morrison.
There was one that came before us recently, and they had an odd-shaped lot, and they were having a hard time. It was a setback issue as opposed to an outdoor issue.
Are you talking about for outdoor self-storage?
Yeah.
Yeah, the one, I think it was the Washington and Cemetery one.
No, it
possibly.
was
There a
over
second one,
around
too.
Delaney.
Oh, they were looking for outdoor?
We've had at least,
No, this was a factory that,
a factory.
yeah, this
Oh, a
was,
factory that had
yeah, this was a
outdoor storage.
factory. I don't remember what their name was, though.
Right, but as you do remember that, and brought up a good point, that self-storage facility that was coming to us informally at Cemetery in Washington, they did have some outdoor boat and RV storage.
Right.
Oh, I thought it was all indoor.
No, they were
Had
asking for
like a
outdoor,
canopy
too.
over it, but it was like open air.
Oh, okay, so it had a canopy, but you
It
could
had a
see
roof
right in.
structure, but it was open air.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, my personal opinion as it relates to the industrial zonings, it really doesn't make any difference to me whether it's an ancillary use to like a manufacturing facility or if it's a self-storage facility, as long as they're meeting the guidelines, and they're in the I-2 district. I have a bigger issue in the commercial areas, especially commercial areas that abut residential areas.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. I mean, I like the fact that they would come to us for a special use permit, because then, as we've seen over the years, each project is different, piece of land is different, the use might be different. I would actually like to see them versus giving carte blanche kind of rights, especially in the commercial districts. But if that I-1 is like the industrial light, maybe I'd be okay with adding that layer of extra scrutiny to make sure that it's,
So
they're coming to us.
you'd want to continue with the special use process for a self-storage facility, even though if it's an ancillary use, a special use permit's not required.
Yeah, I'd kind of like to see it.
Okay.
I mean, there is a legal distinction, because, if it's an I-1, self-storage suggests that there's going to be other third parties now coming to that location.
Okay.
So there is a distinction that way, and I guess, do we have any instances where I-1 is adjacent to residential or not? We might have a couple places or not?
Might
We
have
might
some.
have, but
Not too much. So your point is
We don't have
well
a lot of
taken. It's pretty remote, but I don't know that we could say that there isn't any I-1 adjacent to residential. It's very
From what I saw, there was.
unlikely.
I'm thinking Northwestern, is that I-1
Yeah, I think
there?
Northwestern is where I'm thinking of it.
But there's almost like no I-1 in our whole map. I was
Well,
surprised. I
it's all
started looking
east of-
for it.
It's pretty much just
Very
east of 41 there by Northwestern. So, I mean, this is a good discussion because it does show you it's kind of in a confined area, but I just, wanted to make the point that you could maintain the distinction, because there
Okay.
is a different characteristic
Okay,
to that particular building that, you would have people, it could be residents with boats, maybe sighting there.
okay. Point well taken. So where does that leave us in terms of what staff has proposed?
Well, I think Brian brought up some good points. You have some, whereas in an industrial, when you have accessory outdoor storage, basically you have one, the owner of the business controlling access. With this, you would have potentially multiple parties accessing it. So I could see, based upon that, it might be better to keep it as we have it, which is as a special use in the I-1 zoning district, so that any self-storage facility, whether it was totally indoors, had accessory outdoor, or principal outdoor, would still have to come before the planning and zoning.
Okay, I'm good with that.
And I'd especially like to see it because I think we would be supportive of those options, as long as it fits with the character of the neighborhood and the land use. And also, it would provide some sort of flexibility and options for development. I mean, I wouldn't want to, people who want to use the land for RV storage to go away, just, I don't want the special use permit to be a deterrent, but I'd like to make sure that we can review and make sure it's going to be used properly.
That's how it's drafted now, just
Okay. And personally, I'd much rather see them in an I zone than a C zone. So,
I'd much rather see them in a storage facility than in somebody's front yard. There's a boat on Data that's huge. It does.
Really?
Looks completely out of place.
Oh, is this the one that's wrapped?
Yes.
Is that-
It does not look like it belongs in somebody's driveway.
can they do that in their driveway?
you can get, if you're under 40,000 square feet, you can have one boat or RV, and it has to be your own. You have to live at the facility, the house. It has to fit on the driveway, can't overhang the right-of-way. As long as it's on a hard surface pad, it's permitted.
It's been a long time since I've looked at that.
We should change that, too.
We tried.
Oh, God. We did change it to make those limitations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about the,
Try it in for.
Yeah, go
what
ahead,
about
Josh.
storing RVs in residential areas, like personal RVs?
You can do that.
It's the same,
It's the same,
Boats and RVs, so we went through this a couple of times, and it created a pretty big ruckus. But we ended up with, if you were on a lot and it was under 40,000 square feet, that you could have one boat or RV, and there's definitions of what those are. Has to be on a hard surface pad. There's about 10 other restrictions that you have to be able to meet. And then if you're over 40,000 square feet, you can have two max.
Didn't we also grandfather people into who,
We did, and we went through a grandfathering process, and we have records of those people that have more than, they had to be certified that they had those prior to the adoption of that ordinance, so we do have a record of that.
okay.
It was only a handful, but
Yeah.
15 people, 15 or 20.
It was quite
But they were all at
the
public
issue.
hearing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah. Okay. There's nobody here, so I'm just going to acknowledge that I've opened and closed the floor to the public. Any other thoughts, comments? So am I right in hearing what our discussion is, that what staff is proposing is kind of in line with what we've been talking about?
Yeah, it still has, you're still recommending the special use permit, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that was in there.
Correct,
Yeah.
that's the way it's drafted.
Okay.
Any other comments? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead,
Except,
Josh.
so we're recommending the special use permit, but in this matrix, there's 4 different places where it's listed as permitted. So what is that?
So the first one is for self-storage facility. That one is existing. We're not proposing anything changing with that.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that accessory self-storage is permitted in those.
Okay.
That still requires a special use.
The special use permit
For the-
focus has been on outside stuff.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the next one, the self-storage facility, where the principal use is outdoor storage. This one is
Totally new.
totally new and consistent with how we regulate the uses like contractor storage yard outdoor.
So-
Again, special use in C3, special use in I1, permitted in I2 and I3, which are industrial zoning districts.
Well, why wouldn't we have special use done in I2 and I3?
We can certainly talk about that. Again, we kept it consistent with outdoor storage yard where it's permitted by right in the I2 and the I3 zoning district. And we didn't see a difference between an outdoor storage yard necessarily and a self-storage facility, if it was a principal use.
So an example of an industrial one would be if we had a boat manufacturer and they stored all their boats outside after they produced them? I mean, could they do that?
Potentially. I think it's, our definition says more materials, things like that.
So you couldn't store your boats outside?
If that was the business, I think you could do that, if you had an adjacent. If you
Okay.
had a business and that was the specific business.
I used to work next door to one, so it just came to mind. And they made really big boats.
And again, we even have less I2 and I3 zoned areas, right?
It says the storage of materials as a principal use on the lot for more than 24 hours. But you also have vehicle storage facility, which again gets into vehicle storage, which is another permitted use in I2 and I3. So again, we're just trying to keep it consistent, but if you want to, we can certainly move those into the special use category.
I would prefer to keep them aligned with an ancillary use for, like a manufacturer or distributor.
And I think it is unlikely that we have I2 and I3 next to
Yes.
residential.
Yes.
I don't think that exists.
I'll never say never, but.
Yeah, I was gonna say, not that.
I just know
We don't-
those are very limited
You're right.
zoning classifications within the village.
Any other discussion? Someone willing to advance a motion?
Sorry, you looking for a motion?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I can make a motion. Motion to forward a favorable recommendation on the Village of Gurnee's petition for text amendments to the Gurnee zoning ordinance regarding Article 2.1, definition of general terms, Article 7.1.2, use permissions of the EGG East Grand Gateway Overlay District, and Article 8, uses as proposed by the village staff.
Second?
Okay, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Bow,
No.
Path,
Aye.
Paysack,
Aye.
and Tula.
Aye, motion carries. As you know, we just recommend to the village board, and you guys can figure that
You'll have
out.
to deal with them.
Okay. Next meeting is scheduled for February 17. Does it look like we're going to have one?
We don't have any public hearing items, but we may have a minor item,
Is there
possibly.
one in the pipeline, or you just?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was actually supposed to be on the agenda tonight and just,
They
Wasn't
just weren't,
able to be,
they
so.
weren't ready? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. There's nobody here from the public. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Mr. Pasek,
Second?
second by Mr. Paff. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Thanks, everyone. It's nice to be able to do the consensus thing as opposed to a roll call.